Perfect. Yes. Thank you, Jess. I want to welcome you to our Cybersecurity in the Water Sector, What You Need to Know webinar. We're joined by representatives from EFC, as well as the Office of Homes and Community Renewal and the New York State Department of State. Some quick housekeeping before we get started. There are a few QR codes throughout the presentation today, which when scanned will bring you to relevant program web pages. And with that, Jess, you can go to the next slide, please. Perfect. Thank you. So we'll go through just a brief agenda now. So we have a section on EFC and what we do. We'll go through some system challenges that are faced in the cybersecurity world. We'll discuss our secure program, some technical assistance opportunities, and then some first steps. We'll also have Homes and Community Renewal and the Department of State discuss their opportunities for cybersecurity funding. Next slide. So a little bit about EFC and what we do. We have two main programs, our Clean Water and Drinking Water State Revolving Funds. So these provide low-cost capital for sewer and wastewater and drinking water infrastructure projects. And on both sides, we can provide short and long-term financing with different varied interest rates. In addition to those two financing programs, we also have different water grants, such as our WIA program and EPG program, that assist the cost burden of those capital infrastructure costs. We can go to the next slide. So where does this get us? It gets us to a nation-leading investment. So we operate one of the largest state revolving funds in the nation. So since 1990, we provided over $37 billion to wastewater projects. Since 1996 and the inception of the Drinking Water State Revolving Fund, we provided over $10 billion in assistance. And EFC has also awarded over $2.9 billion in grants to projects since 2015. So now turning towards cybersecurity, we'll look at why it matters for the water infrastructure industry. Drinking water and wastewater infrastructure is critical for public health and environmental protection. With increased automation, there are more opportunities for threats. And with an attack, this can disrupt operations, damage equipment, or compromise safety of citizens. So now looking at some of the specific challenges that systems face. So we have legacy control systems that were not designed with cyber threats in mind. So this can open the door to bigger issues. Smaller systems may have limited IT or cyber expertise, which can be compounded by budget and staffing concerns. There's also the overlap of physical and cyber vulnerabilities with information technology, which is more cyber, and as well as operational technology, which is more the physical side. With a rising number of phishing and ransomware attacks, it's important to be cognizant of that. And then in addition, systems are being specifically targeted by state-affiliated hacker groups, specifically from Russia and Iran. And so we'll look at the next slide, which goes over some more threats. So as I mentioned, there are state-sponsored cyber actors that are looking to attack systems. There's also advanced persistent threats, or APT, cyber tools that target industrial control systems and SCADA devices. In addition, there are known exploited vulnerabilities within IT and OT systems that can be used to damage equipment and attack your system. There are also third-party risks, as well as existing cyber threats, including within your system, as well as a big emphasis for today, which is the social engineering side, or phishing with malware and ransomware. With that, I'll turn it over to Gabby to discuss our commitment to water infrastructure cybersecurity.
Hello, everyone. Okay, I'm just making sure my sound is on. Alrighty. So New York has recently committed to water infrastructure cybersecurity. Governor Hochul quoted that cyber attacks on critical infrastructure can have devastating impacts on communities, and we must act now to defend our water and wastewater systems with the same urgency and rigor we bring to other critical sectors. These new regulations and grant programs reflect our commitment to protecting public health and safety while helping under-resourced entities modernize for a digital age. So we're putting in cybersecurity minimum standards, which will defend the state's critical infrastructure against increasingly dangerous and damaging cyber attacks, like what Nick just described. And there will be a new cyber grant program implemented along with technical assistance to bolster that security and resilience of our water and wastewater systems. Next slide. So our upcoming grant opportunities is called Secure or Strengthening Essential Cybersecurity for Utilities and Resiliency Enhancements. So there is a $2.5 million appropriation in the 2026 state budget with a goal to support cybersecurity risk assessments and hardening efforts for drinking water and wastewater systems, as well as opportunities for assessments and implementation phases. This is what we have for right now. So if you want to learn more about this program and figure out when it comes out, feel free to sign up for our EFC mailer, which will notify you when it launches. And we'll have more information about signing up towards the end of our presentation. Next slide.
And Gabby, I'm so sorry to interrupt, but some attendees are having a hard time hearing you. Would you mind just speaking up a bit?
You got it.
Thank you.
So overview of EFC's technical assistance. We have our cybersecurity hub, which is on our website, and that is a centralized resource for systems. It includes our best practices, the 12 first steps for cybersecurity preparedness, which we'll discuss later, as well as training materials. We also are providing consultation opportunities, so you can meet with us, the community assistance team, to see what funding opportunities make sense for your project and discuss what supports are out there for cybersecurity, as well as what you can do to bolster your cyber resilience. And as I mentioned, we have our upcoming grant, aka Secure, and that's coming soon. Next slide. For existing funding, we do have our Clean Water State Revolving Fund, or CWSRF, and that funding is for publicly owned treatment works, including security and cybersecurity for wastewater treatment plants and collection systems, as well as cybersecurity enhancements for water quality infrastructure. And then our DWSRF fund, or Drinking Water State Revolving Fund, provides funding for SCADA installs and upgrades. Funding through Homes and Community Renewal and Department of State will be discussed later in this presentation. So now I'm going to give it to Paul to take over.
Hello, my name is Paul Kocha, and I'm a program coordinator on the community assistance team. And I'm going to talk a little about the 12 first steps for cybersecurity preparedness. Next slide, please. So as part of our cybersecurity technical assistance, we created a checklist that has basically 12 first steps for cybersecurity preparedness. This is for supporting communities who are evaluating their systems and their easy first steps for getting ready to conduct an assessment. This is meant to be a broad overview with a couple of easy items to implement. It should not be used as a replacement for an assessment or a robust cybersecurity vulnerability assessment. Next slide, please. So the first one to get at is to change your default passwords. A lot of systems are set up with, off-the-shelf hardware because it's cheap, readily available, and can be quickly installed. However, quick installation doesn't necessarily mean strong security because, like anybody who set up a modem, a router, or any other piece of equipment, a lot of times the factory default password is just in the product user manual, and if it's not there, it's easily available on the internet. This is something most people change, but a lot of times it can be very difficult to change, especially when you're dealing with your OT equipment. So, for example, there was a large hack from the Cyber Avengers group that attacked PLCs that had all been left on their default password, which in this case was 1111. So, definitely something you want to change if you were able to do so. Obviously, none of this stuff is easy or necessarily cheap. Next slide, please. So the second, and a little bit more robust, is multi-factor authentication. By this point, I think most people have had at least some exposure to multi-factor authentication, um, which in this case, relies on basically something you know and something you have. So for an easy example, most people have had to log into a bank website or to Facebook or something like that, and you're using an unfamiliar browser, and then it will send you a text message. A lot of times you can also do this using an app or basically where you have to hit a link or put in a set of digits. This provides an additional layer of security for an account because it makes it much, much harder to log in um, without having the necessary credentials. Without this, you only need the password to access an account and possibly a username. Multi-factor authentication used to be more difficult, but it's built into a lot of systems today, so it's a great option to enable to hugely increase your security. The FBI Cyber Division has reported that 99.9% of hacked accounts don't use MFA. The biggest issue is trying to make sure that you know what accounts you've got and what you can actually secure with MFA. Next slide, please. So as part of that, you want to have strong passwords and a password policy. I think we've all, used accounts or worked with parents or other people where you have a password that's like 12345, or the password is just password. But even more complicated passwords, where you have like a kid's birthday and your last name or something. These weak and simple passwords can be cracked almost instantly, which is kind of an alarming factor. Especially if your system doesn't have it set up so there's a password policy so people can keep trying to log in over and over and over again. While it would take a human being a very long time to guess passwords, it's not that hard to have a computer just brute force it and get through super quickly. The best way to do this is to basically have a longer, more complicated password. With current systems, there's been estimates that it can take several 100,000 years to do a very long password that uses upper and lowercase letters and is case enforced. But that's why a lot of solid password policies will require uppercase letters, lowercase letters, symbols, numbers, just to prevent being able to easily brute force through your system and its security. Next slide, please. So for user accounts on our checklist, we have these broken up into a couple of different areas that we've consolidated here, just because they all sort of get at similar ideas. User accounts are one of those things that seem really frustrating when you're the actual user, but provide a lot of security for keeping your system secure. So an easy one is that it needs to require unique and separate credentials between accessing OT and your IT networks. This can seem like it's a huge burden because you're busy, you're trying to work on something, like fixing a pump or something, not trying to remember what the password was for this one system. However, it is incredibly important, especially for systems that are connected to the internet, because it prevents attackers from using compromised credentials from accessing other accounts. So for example, if you guys previously had an issue, a couple of your passwords were leaked online, it might compromise an email system, but this keeps it from also compromising one of your pumps. A second one is to immediately disable access when it's no longer required, especially when people retire, change a role, are no longer employed by an organization. These can be incredibly insidious because when people aren't around anymore, you don't think to look at their accounts. It requires a lot of overhead. But this is really, really important for two reasons. One, outside attackers can use these accounts as a method for network intrusion. They find an old employee's credentials. The person hasn't been there for 5 years, but their credentials were never inactivated. So they can use that to get in. They don't have to hack anything. They can just log in. It is also a protection against insider threats. There's been several incidents of cybersecurity, incidents at water infrastructure plants that were disgruntled insiders. In one case, an outside contractor, another one, an employee was terminated. It's not the type of access you want people to have if they, especially because the public health or environmental concerns can be so great. And the last one is to separate user and privileged accounts, which sounds really complicated, but people should only have the level of access needed to do their job. This helps keep your system secure, but it also keeps your account secure. So if somebody gets a lower level account, one that's just used by an operator to, log in and check, sodium hydroxide levels or something like that, that cannot also then be used to disable whole systems or take PLCs. In general, just having your account separated is a huge safeguard towards keeping your system safer. Next slide, please. So we've mentioned a lot of things about having, a lot of systems. And one of the big things you're going to want to do is take an inventory of all of your assets. While this is, complicated enough when you've got physical assets, it's especially important when you've got IT and OT assets, because you're going to have things that are on network and off network. There's a saying that comes from cybersecurity in other areas, but you can't protect what you don't know you have. So an accurate inventory is incredibly helpful in identifying, quickly mitigating any vulnerabilities you have. While it can be a little time consuming to start, it's a fantastic resource to work off of, because all the systems that you currently have, in your entire plant. Where are they located physically? Where are they located on your networks? So it makes it a lot easier to both track them down, make sure you exactly know what you've got, and also to make sure to lock down any vulnerabilities you might have. Next slide, please, Jess. Okay, and backups. We've all done backups on our phones, on our laptops. It's really, really nice when it runs automatically. And so if you've got a system that comes out, you can just immediately bring it from backup. With things like your systems, this is incredibly important because they are usually purpose-built. And each system's got its own little peculiarities that you need to make sure are reflected in your system. So you want to make sure that you've got backups that are stored separately from the source system. So if you've got stuff on like your jump drives or like a network access, that it can't immediately then just get compromised if your system gets compromised. Nothing's worse than, you have a ransomware attack and the ransomware also attacks your backups. Your backups are also locked out and you can't access any of those. You also want to test your backups and evaluate your system restoration process and kind of practice this before you really need to. It can take time and it can be frustrating, but it makes sure that when your backups are actually needed, it's, you've got the backup ready to go, you plug the system in, and in an hour you're back online, as opposed to waiting, days or, even goodness forbid, like weeks. The nice part about backups is not only are they essential for cyber incidents, but they're also really useful for hardware malfunctions or physical destruction. So if you get water damage on computers or a system just breaks, you're able to restore it and have minimal system downtime. Next slide, please. So that gets us to updating systems regularly. As most people have seen, especially in the news, there's, vulnerabilities are discovered all the time in all sorts of different types of systems. So it's very important to keep your system updated to reduce vulnerabilities. One fairly easy way to keep on top of some of this is to just subscribe to CISA, or if you are a member of a water ISAC, to keep track of some of their discovered software vulnerabilities, because these are a great way to find out what vulnerabilities were discovered, what piece of IT or OT equipment it affects, and be able to get that fix resolved as early as possible and not have to wait to find out about it because somebody's exploited this vulnerability. This is even more important because the threat landscape, the time frame on a threat landscape has shrunk year by year by year. It used to be something like Microsoft would put out a patch or an update, and it would take weeks for people to find exploits and vulnerabilities, and now you're down to days, possibly even hours, and somebody's already got that vulnerability dialed in. With that, it is really important to update when you update and patch your system, that it's got compatibility with your current system, This is where stuff like your backups can be really important because you can, load up test systems, run the software, double check that everything works, and then roll it out on your main system. Sometimes it can even be worth having, one system that can work really, really well, and then have the backup be in a slightly older but more reliable system. As part of this, because it's so problematic, consider removing any public-facing internet from systems that can't be patched anymore, whether because it's too old or because the software no longer supports it. So if you've got older systems running like Windows 7, Windows 10, there might even be like Windows 3.1 systems still banging around there. It can still run its OT equipment, but it should never touch the internet because it's too easy to compromise it quickly. Next slide, please. All right. So we've talked a lot about vulnerabilities and cyber attacks. One of the major things you can do is have a written cybersecurity incident response plan, which is, your 3-ring binder that explains what happens when you've got a cybersecurity incident. We're going to emphasize written a couple times in here because you want to have these, in addition to whatever computer copies you have, you're going to want to have printed copies around because, you don't want to be in a situation where your system is compromised and you can't actually access your cybersecurity incident response plan because it's on the computer that's locked out with ransomware. These are really good to update and practice regularly, especially with critical threat scenarios, because if you practice it now, by the time it actually happens, you'll be in a much better place to get your systems back up and running quickly, or be able to quickly take them into a manual position, because it's going to be a while before your systems are back up. In addition to basically having, what's necessary for your systems, and what you need to do, you also want to have, it's part of that written procedure, who do you need to report to that you've had a cybersecurity incident? And this would include things like, the reporting line in your current plant, but is also probably going to require you to notify, state officials, county officials, local municipal officials to get everybody queued up and able to help support your system and get it documented as quickly as possible. Because, again, when you have it written down, it means once you've written it down once, you can keep it updated for the future, but it's definitely one that you're going to want to have ready to go just in case something happens. Next slide, please. So we briefly touched on this earlier, but internet access for OT systems, you want to ensure that assets that connect to the public internet don't expose unnecessary exploitable services like remote desktop. Windows in particular, but other systems have very bad habits of having lots of ports open, which can do very, very useful things like enable a remote desktop or enable your computer to talk easily to a network. And sometimes it's really good, but when it's running critical infrastructure, it can be really bad because you don't know if some of these ports are open or not. If you go through a cybersecurity assessment, it will probably help flag that. And there's ways you can help lock all this down. There's a lot of services available for infrastructure, like from CISA that can help capture vulnerable ports. You can sign up and they will run a vulnerability scan of your system and sort of see what ports are out there so you can make sure that those are closed down. Or if you can't close it down, that you're able to eliminate those connections between OT assets and the internet. This is especially important because, as mentioned earlier, you might have systems that are too old or too unsecure that they can't actually be connected to the public-facing internet. This connection of OT systems to the internet is a huge focus on the DEC and DOH cybersecurity guidelines. We're still waiting for the final regulations to come out because their comment period is closed, but we don't have the final regs yet, but it should address a lot of what are the requirements going to be. And it could be things like disconnecting systems. If you've got systems that need to be connected to a SCADA or some other reporting setup, there's ways you can do it with a one-way, like a one-way diode. But you're going to want to make sure that this is all well secured and up to date with the current regulations. Next slide, please, Jess. Okay. For our final one, we are going to talk briefly about phishing, which I think everybody has seen in one form or another. Because it's a hugely popular form of cybercrime right now. So it is a broadly refers to sort of social engineering to gain access to information or systems that you should not have access to. It used to mainly encompass things like email spam, which I think everybody's had at some form. Most people have a pretty robust system to help filter a lot of that, but it's gotten up to SMS phishing, which is going to be a lot of this text messages people get that I think everybody's gotten now, where it's the easy pass scam, or messages that purport to be from people that I don't know this number. Where did it come from? Up to far more sophisticated ones like voice phishing, where you can use AI to duplicate the sound of like the town supervisor or another authority figure that tells you to do something, and also trying to hijack other things like two-factor authentication. We're not going to dwell too much on those because that's very sort of advanced problems, and for most cybersecurity for infrastructure, it's a fairly small issue. So the phishing will oftentimes affect your system in a couple different ways. The two most common ones are ransomware, where you have software that encrypts your file or system and demands payment. The sort of, I don't know if anyone's had this happen, but you'll basically come back to a system, it will have a black screen with possibly color on it or something. It says like, hey, your system's encrypted. Give us a bunch of Bitcoin and we'll give you the decryption key and get your data back. It's an open question whether you should pay this or not. The advice is sort of a lot of it will depend on what your current cyber policy is. There might be usually you attempt to not pay it and hope dishes or FBI has a decryption that you can use. But it's hugely disruptive, even if it is something you are able to get around. The second one is a lot of time phishing, instead of using it to steal, or in addition or in replacement of it stealing credentials, is it can install software, especially if you click on something and it installs malware contained inside a macro, inside like a PowerPoint document, or it's a piece of software that you ran that you weren't sure what it did. And what happens is that users are able to get access to systems that they don't have, either with credentials or just basically it makes a hole in your firewall and a person is able to access your system. One of the big issues is that infrastructure has a fairly broad threat landscape, because a lot of times it's not necessarily the plant that can be targeted, although the plant may be targeted. You can have stuff like someone in the municipality's office. So situations have come up before where like the town clerk's email gets compromised, and the person claiming to be the town clerk can then reach out to people at the plant and ask for information like, hey, what was the password for this account? I can't quite get in here, or could you send me user information? We need to have a backup of this. So goodness knows what they're using it for, but it's stuff you need to be able to keep an eye on and keep logged out. Next slide, please. So there's a lot of efforts to prevent phishing, and a lot of them come down to what feels like common sense. You can get past a lot of them by having effective email policies and training, and just try to slow down and think. So a lot of emails, a lot of things that are attempting to do phishing are trying to get you to click on it by driving a sense of urgency. You need to respond inside an hour or we're going to disable your account. Or you get something from you get a high priority email from your HR person that says something like, you need to do your acknowledgement right now. Or it's things like too good to be true messages, like you may have won the lottery already, click on this link. You can also look for things like misspelled URLs, strange logins. These used to be ubiquitous. Usually they are harder to spot now than they were previously. But just think before you click. If it looks weird, if it looks dodgy, mouse over the link, see where it goes. Try to get some common sense, or use other means to contact a person. Like, hey, Jen at HR, did you just send this, acknowledgement form? I don't think I've seen this before. So it helps you verify the actual sender was the person you think it was. It's also really important to protect personal info. This can be stuff from like, the employees or people working at the plant, but because a lot of times you may have things like billing information, if that's handled internally, you might have information on town residents, like specific addresses, names, and hookups. This is all information that you would want to try and protect, keep safe. And finally, if you have the opportunity, make sure that you report it. A lot of times this can be handled internally, and you may have like some IT officials, but it can also just be stuff like, talking to other people around you, like, hey, Nick, did you get this weird looking email or weird looking request? I'm not sure what this is. Is this legit? So these are a couple of things that are covered in our checklist. Our checklist is far more brief, but highly recommend taking a look through that and seeing some of the easy things you can take a look at doing for your system to help keep it a little more up to date and a little bit safer. So I'm going to hand it back over to Gabby to talk about our community assistance teams.
Hi again. Okay. So if you're not familiar, we are the community assistance team. So we're here to assist all municipalities within New York State. And with response to cybersecurity, we now offer one-on-one cyber consultations where we can discuss your specific problem and discuss your specific problems and come up with some solutions. If you would like to request a meeting or sign up for emails and register for our webinars, please use this QR code. You can also contact us by calling us at that number on the screen, as well as emailing us if you can't find the request a meeting link or whatever. But we do have a specific request form for cyber consultation, so please do use that one or email us and we'll get that figured out for you. Next slide. So once again, please do sign up for our emails if you would like to be notified of our grant announcements, such as the launch of the Secure program, as well as knowing when our webinars and our events and upcoming deadlines are. So if you use that QR code, that is where that will take you to sign up. Next. And yes, so thank you for joining. We're going to move on to our next partners, but if you do have any questions about our Clean Water State Revolving Fund, this is the email. If you have questions for our drinking water side, this is that email, design@health. And then our website is efc.ny.gov, which is where this QR code will take you. Thank you. And we'll move on to homes and community renewal.
Thanks, Abby. So I guess if we can just, this is Charlie Philly, and I'm one of the program directors here at OCR. We partner quite a bit with the EFC, with the CADS teams on co-funding projects. And so I'll give you just a couple slides here on how CDBG can help participate in CDBG infrastructure and cybersecurity. So if we just go right to the next slide. The Community Development Block Grant Program, again, is administered by the Office of Community Renewal, and we fund critical infrastructure that supports safe and stable housing and public infrastructure. Increasingly, we do see system resilience include cybersecurity, especially for small and mid-sized systems that depend on remote operations or SCADA controls. CDBG funds may support hardware or software upgrades as part of a larger eligible water or sewer improvement if they are necessary for reliable service to residents, particularly in low and moderate income areas. Examples include replacing outdated control systems, adding secure communications between lift stations, or hardening access at treatment plants. And if we just go right to the next slide. So the program can also complement EFC's upcoming Secure initiative, helping local governments leverage both HUD and state resources to improve operational and digital security. For the purpose of CDBG, our funding is capped out if you do infrastructure in support of existing housing. It is up to $1.5 million. If you come in under the competitive application through the CFA, is a standalone project. Again, that's up to 1.5 million. If you do come in with co-funding with one of our co-funding partners, that funding does increase up to $2 million. I did include on the slide here a link. So if you go to the eligible communities, you can go right to that and determine if your community is eligible to apply. The next step we would need to do after that is to make sure that the project meets benefits, which again, CDBG is a program for low and moderate income persons. So we just need to see that 51% of the beneficiaries at that point are low and moderate income. And the next slide is just our contact information. So again, feel free to contact me either through ocrinfo@hcr.ny.gov or by phone.
Hey, y'all. I guess I'm next. I'm Kyle Wilbur. I'm with the Department of State in Albany, our local government efficiency grant program. And we're just going to just talk briefly about a funding opportunity that we have where technology and cybersecurity efforts are a priority for us, not necessarily just with water and wastewater infrastructure, but the funding is there, and we thought it'd be good just to make you aware of it. Next. So our local government efficiency grant, as you can read on this slide, we support multi-municipal efforts, shared efforts between municipalities for local government efficiency and shared services. So again, not necessarily sure what type of project we might be looking at, but we've done multiple consolidations of infrastructure, shared management of infrastructure, and again, when we talk about our priorities in a couple slides, technology and cybersecurity can be one of those things that is a piece of that shared system. So the goal is to reduce current and future municipal operations and costs, incorporating enhanced technologies to modernize the delivery of services. We support three types of projects: regionally scaled projects where communities, 4 or more communities working with regional planning entities or counties work on regional projects, local projects that don't have a regional planning board or a county with 4 partners, and then smaller qualification grants that help regional planning boards and counties develop applications for future rounds. So we can talk more specifically about this if you want to get in contact with us. But again, generally the idea of our program is to support shared services for municipal efficiencies. Next. Our funding is not out yet, but we anticipate a release sometime this fall, early fall. Not so early anymore, but end of this month, early next month. But we have $8 million available for implementation and planning projects, 7.2 of which we're allocating towards implementation, 8 million for planning. You can see this chart. Our implementation projects are capped at 1.25 million, planning at $100,000. There are different match levels for each. Next. This refers to what I talked about earlier about regional projects or local projects. To qualify for an LG grant, you have to have at least 2 lead applicants, and our eligible local governments include all general purpose local governments, special improvement districts, school districts, really any entity that provides a local service, public entity that provides a local service. But if you are considering larger projects, we enable you to apply for a regional project, which is again led by a regional planning board or county. We support planning and implementation under the regional projects, but more details can be discussed with us offline. Next. So the real reason we're here, under our review for the past few years, we've prioritized certain types of actions. And one of those is information technology services and cybersecurity. So along with EMS, countywide or multi-municipal code enforcement, water and wastewater management systems, and clean energy. But when EFC said they're going to do a session on cybersecurity, we figured it'd be a good opportunity just to make you aware that those types of projects will receive priority under our local government efficiency grant program. We know smaller communities often work with counties for their IT services. But if you're looking at a shared project, you can consider our local government efficiency program. Next. I think that's it. That's my contact info. Very short, but please get a hold of us. Again, we'll be releasing our RFA likely in a few weeks. So get a hold of us. Thank you.
And thanks everyone for joining us this afternoon. Just wanted to emphasize again that if you have any questions or concerns about cybersecurity for your water infrastructure systems, we are definitely set up to take the cybersecurity consultations. You can find those on the EFC website or from the link posted earlier. And we would also encourage everyone to sign up for the EFC mailer to get the exact launch date for the 2 secure grants for assessment and implementation as soon as we have more info on those. Thank you so much for joining this afternoon, and have a great time. And Jess, I think we can probably stop sharing and open it up for questions.